Azenza lay quiet beneath a copper sun, the kind of sun that left shadows long and spirits twitching in their graves. The village was small, no more than 30 clay huts arranged in a circle like protective arms around an ancestral shrine built of stone, feathers, and bone. The people of Azenza lived by one rule passed down from the first seers: when a person dies, the earth must welcome their body before the sun dips behind the mountains. To disobey this rule was to invite madness, misfortune, or worse, restless spirits that claw through the night seeking breath they no longer own. 13-year-old Monica sat just outside her mother's hut, her thin arms wrapped around her knees, eyes wide and dry. She hadn't cried yet. She couldn't. The image of her mother's final moments clung to her chest like a stone. One moment, Adama had been singing softly, shelling groundnuts with fingers made wise from years of work. The next, she was coughing, once, twice, then hacking so violently that blood sprayed across the woven mat. It wasn't red blood. It was dark. Black. As if something rotten had bloomed inside her and burst out all at once. The villagers had gathered, murmuring prayers and making the sign against evil. The healer came and pressed his hands to her mother's cooling skin, only to shake his head and back away. "This is not a sickness of this world," he said under his breath, but not so low that Monica couldn't hear. "Something has claimed her." That was all he said before he walked away, his charms clinking softly like guilty chains. Okongwu arrived later than expected, smelling of palm wine and strange herbs, wearing a red feather in his cap that hadn't been there before. He didn't touch the body. He didn't cry. He stood over Adama, staring at her as if trying to confirm something. Then he turned to the elders and said with a stiff voice, "We cannot bury her today. There is a rare ritual, the ritual of the 3 eyes, that must be performed. It requires the rising sun." The elders murmured among themselves. 1 or 2 protested, warning that the rule was clear: no corpse must sleep through the night. But Okongwu was loud, commanding, and wore his title of hunter with pride. He was not just a man, he was feared, respected, obeyed. Monica looked up at him, her voice small. Mama didn't believe in the 3 eyes ritual. Okongwu glared down at her. "She died with her mouth full of black blood. That means her spirit is troubled. You want her to come back screaming?" That silenced everyone. As the sun drooped lower, and the red sky bruised into purple, Monica watched them prepare her mother's body. They washed her gently, wrapped her in white cloth, placed coins over her eyes, and laid her on the mat near the center of the hut. No incense. No drumming. Just silence and the stink of sudden death. Word spread quickly through the village. Children were pulled into huts early. Fires burned lower than usual. No one sang. No one beat drums. Even the dogs seemed to know something was wrong. A quiet dread settled over Azenza like dust on forgotten relics. By nightfall, not a single door opened. Monica sat outside alone, arms still hugging her knees, until Okongwu's shadow fell across her like a curse. "You'll stay with her tonight," he said coldly. "What?" "She's your mother. You'll honor her." "But, the rule, the stories." He grabbed her wrist tightly, fingers pressing bruises into her skin. "Are you questioning your elder?" She didn't answer. She only looked up into his face, trying to find even a flicker of grief, of sorrow. There was none. He dragged her toward the hut, opened the door, and shoved her inside. "Keep the fire low. Don't open the door for anyone. Not even if they call your name." Then he shut it behind her and locked the wooden bolt from outside. The air inside was thick, damp, and cold. The small fire in the center of the hut crackled faintly, casting long, dancing shadows across the walls. Her mother's body lay on the far side of the room, still wrapped in cloth. The coins on her eyes gleamed like watching stars. Monica crept to her corner and curled up, facing the fire but not daring to glance behind her. But the hut had changed. It didn't feel like home anymore. The air had a taste, bitter, like old ashes. The silence buzzed in her ears. She thought she could hear something just beneath it, something like breathing. At first, she convinced herself it was her own. She pulled the blanket tighter around herself, shutting her eyes, trying to pretend she was somewhere else, anywhere else. She remembered how her mother used to braid her hair by firelight, humming songs that had no words. She remembered how her mother used to laugh, how her eyes crinkled at the corners. But then, from behind her, came a sound that did not belong in memory. A slow, wet inhale. Like lungs learning how to work again. Nwanuka froze. Her blood turned to glass. The fire flickered as though it, too, sensed the wrongness. She turned her head, slowly, heart pounding in her chest so loudly she was sure it would wake the dead. The cloth around her mother's feet had moved. She hadn't touched it. There was no wind. Yet the end of the shroud had uncurled slightly, as though something beneath it had flexed. Then another breath, louder this time. Definitely not hers. She backed away across the floor, eyes wide. Her voice caught in her throat, refusing to scream. Then, beneath the mat, just inches from where her mother's head rested, came a soft, unmistakable sound. Breathing. Deliberate. Rhythmic. Alive. The fire had long since died, leaving the hut drowned in shadow. Only the moonlight, broken and slivered through the gaps in the thatch roof, offered a pale imitation of comfort. Nwanuka sat rigid, knees pressed to her chest, fingers gripping her blanket so tightly her knuckles ached. The breathing had stopped, or at least, it had grown quiet enough to make her question whether she'd imagined it. But she hadn't. She knew she hadn't. She hadn't slept. Couldn't sleep. Every sound became a threat. The creak of old wood. The whisper of wind through the walls. Her own heartbeat roaring like thunder in her ears. Then she heard it. Her name. Nguyen, Nika. It wasn't spoken. It was breathed. Drawn out in a low, watery hush, like it had traveled a long way underwater before reaching her. It didn't come from the door or the window. It came from behind her. From the mat. Her skin erupted in goosebumps. Her throat clenched around a scream that refused to come. She didn't want to turn. She shouldn't turn. But her body betrayed her, twisting slowly until her eyes could just barely see the outline of her mother's shrouded body. She blinked once. Twice. Something had changed. When the villagers had wrapped the body, they had crossed Adama's arms tightly over her chest. But now, one arm lay at her side, the hand splayed out on the mat, fingers pointing toward Nwanuka. She stared. Motionless. The hand was wrong. It looked too loose, too relaxed, like it belonged to someone asleep, not someone dead. The white cloth covering her mother's face hadn't moved, but the body beneath it seemed different. Tilted. As though it had rolled slightly during the night. But how? She hadn't touched it. No one had entered. The door remained barred. There were no animals, no breeze strong enough to do this. Nothing. Except Nwanuka. There it was again. The whisper. Closer. She clapped her hands over her ears, but the name wasn't just a sound anymore, it was in her bones. It soaked into her like rain through cracked earth. Tears filled her eyes. She bit her lip, hard enough to taste blood, trying to keep quiet, trying not to move. Her mother would never hurt her. Never. But this thing, whatever it was, this was not her mother. And yet, she remembered something. A flash, from weeks ago. Her mother, crouched beside her at the river, the smell of herbs clinging to her hands. She had whispered something, low and fierce. If I ever die before the moon is full, don't trust him. Especially not at night. Who? Nwanuka had asked. Her mother had hesitated, then looked over her shoulder. Okangwu. There is rot inside him. Not everything he buries stays buried. At the time, Nwanuka hadn't understood. She thought her mother was just angry. Okangwu had come home late again, his eyes red, smelling like secrets. But now, alone in the dark, the warning rang in her ears like a curse. A soft thump snapped her out of the memory. She whipped around. The corpse had shifted again. The hand was now just a foot away from her. She scrambled backward until her spine pressed against the wall. Her breathing came in shallow gasps, eyes darting from the hand to the face beneath the cloth. And then it moved. The cloth twitched. Slowly, like a curtain stirred by a breath of wind, the white wrap lifted away from her mother's face. It slipped off completely, revealing what lay beneath. Her mother's skin looked pale and waxy in the moonlight, lips slightly parted. The coins had fallen off, one rested near the mat, the other nowhere in sight. And then, to Nwanaka's horror, the eyes opened. They were not her mother's eyes. They were white. Completely white. No pupils. No light. No humanity. Just void. And they were looking directly at her. Nwanaka's scream caught in her throat. Her limbs refused to move. Her mother's body, Adama, the one who had sung to her every night, who braided her hair with soft, calloused fingers, was now staring at her with dead eyes that didn't blink. Then, the corpse moved. The neck twisted, slowly, jerkily, until the head was facing her. The joints cracked softly with the motion, like dry sticks breaking. Nwanaka wanted to crawl into the wall. To vanish. To melt into the earth. Then the corpse spoke. "Ron." The voice was hoarse, like someone choking on sand. The lips barely moved. "Ron, he is not who you think he is." And with that, the corpse's jaw slackened. The head dropped back to the mat. Silence returned. But it was no longer the silence of sleep. It was the silence before something begins. The morning came as if dragged by a reluctant sun. The sky was washed in pale gray, and a heavy stillness hung over Azenza like a wet cloth. The villagers kept their distance from the hut where Nwanaka had spent the night, casting furtive glances and whispering behind cupped hands. No one dared come close. Not after what they'd heard. Inside, Nwanaka had not moved from her corner, eyes raw from tears and fatigue. Her mother's body lay where it had last fallen, the head tilted, the mouth slightly open, the white eyes still and unseeing. And yet, she could not unhear the words, "Run, he is not who you think he is." The door burst open with a loud thwack. Nwanaka flinched violently. Okangwa stood in the doorway, panting and theatrical, his eyes darting around the room before settling on her. "Nwanaka," he cried, stepping in. "What happened?" "I came at first light. I heard a scream. Was it you?" She didn't answer. She only stared at him. His eyes flicked to the corpse. He hesitated. "It moved," she said quietly, voice hoarse. Okangwa blinked. "The body," she continued, louder now. "It moved. It looked at me. It spoke." His mouth twitched into a mask of concern. "Ah, my child, the mind plays tricks after such a night. Your mother's body, sometimes, in the early stages of death, the muscles twitch. The air trapped inside escapes. It is decay. Nothing more." Nwanaka shook her head. Her eyes were open. And white. He crouched beside the body and pressed the lids shut with surprising tenderness. "Your grief deceives you. Come. Let's prepare for the cleansing. I will take care of it. Alone." As he reached to wrap the corpse in cloth, several villagers appeared behind him at the doorway, including the village priest, a tall man with faded ochre marks on his face. "She has not been buried," the priest said sternly. "It is already past the morning offering. This is dangerous." Okangwa stood. "I agree. But first, one final ritual must be done to cleanse her spirit. Alone. It is what she would have wanted." The priest frowned. "Alone? That is not the custom of Azenzu." "I am her husband," Okangwa said smoothly. "You know our ways. It is allowed for certain rites." Murmurs stirred among the villagers. The priest relented but with hesitation. "Do not delay her burial. We do not want unrest." Okangwa nodded. "It will be done." Nwanuka watched as they left, leaving her alone with him once more. His hand briefly touched her shoulder. "Go outside, NWA. I need time to say goodbye." She did not speak. She did not move. Eventually, when she was certain he wasn't looking, she slipped through the back slit in the hut's wall, something her mother had cut months ago as an escape in case of fire. But Nwanuka knew it had always been about something else. She ran, past the yam fields and cracked earth, until she reached the edge of the village, where a crooked hut sat hunched beneath a kola tree. Mama Ajike was already waiting outside, stirring a thick red paste in a clay bowl. Her eyes, milky with age but sharp with knowing, narrowed as Nwanuka approached. "Child," she said without looking up. "You should not be out. I need to know what's happening. What's wrong with my mother?" She moved. Mama Ajike nodded slowly. "Yes. I thought she might." "You knew?" The old woman wiped her hands and motioned Nwanuka to sit. "Your mother came to me 3 market days ago. She looked tired. Faded. She said she felt poisoned. Her bones ached, her stomach turned from food. She feared her husband." Nwanuka's mouth went dry. "She said the same to me. That I shouldn't trust him. She asked for bitterroot," Mama Ajike continued, "to cleanse her body. But it was too late. The sickness was already inside her. Why didn't you tell the priest? Or warn her?" "I did," Mama Ajike said grimly. "But your stepfather is clever. He gave her just enough to seem well again. And then, he waited." Nwanuka clenched her fists. "She said he wasn't who he pretended to be." "No," the old woman said, leaning in. "He is not. He practices things he should not. His family line traces back to the Forbidden Hills, where the land drinks blood. There is rot in his soul." Nwanuka's voice trembled. My mother, she opened her eyes last night. They were white. She said to run. She said, he isn't who I think he is." Mama Ajike's expression turned grave. "Then the ritual has begun." "What ritual?" "Amwagajiaya," she whispered. "It means death that rejects burial. It's an ancient vengeance rite, older than Azenzu itself. When someone dies with a soul burdened by injustice, if the proper herbs were consumed, or if the land itself cries out, the spirit refuses to rest. It awakens. Not alive. Not dead. Caught between." Nwanuka gasped. "My mother. She wants revenge, child," Mama Ajike said. "She cannot pass until the truth is known. Until justice is done. But if he buries her before that, the ritual fails. Her soul may be trapped forever." Nwanuka stood, heart pounding. "Then I have to stop him." Mama Ajike gripped her arm. "Be careful. The forest is where dark things walk. If he takes her there, it is not for burial, it is to bind her soul in silence." By the time she returned to the edge of the compound, the sun was setting low, casting long shadows through the trees. Her heart pounded as she crept toward the hut. But it was empty. The mat was bare. Her mother's body, gone. Fear spiked through her. She ran behind the compound, scanning the earth. Then she heard a dragging sound, soft, rhythmic, like something heavy pulled across leaves. She followed it. Through the underbrush. Into the edge of the forest. And there, through a break in the trees, she saw him. Okanwo. Dragging her mother's wrapped corpse by the ankles. Toward the forbidden burial grounds, where even the oldest elders refused to tread. Nwanuka clamped her hand over her mouth. She did not scream. She only watched. And followed. The forest loomed before Nwanuka like the jaws of some waiting beast, its trees ancient and gnarled, roots twisted like sleeping serpents. The air was thick, too still, too silent. Even the birds seemed to have vanished, and the usual hum of insects was swallowed by a strange, pressing hush. She had grown up hearing tales of the sacred forest, where spirits tested the hearts of mortals and punished those who walked its soil with wickedness in their veins. But tonight, she didn't have the luxury of fear. She crept between the thick roots and foliage, barefoot and trembling, each step deeper into the darkness. Up ahead, she caught glimpses of movement. Okan was hunched figure dragging the shrouded corpse with unnatural strength. His muttered words floated back to her, not quite Igbo, not quite any language she recognized. It sounded ancient, older than the village itself, carved out of some forgotten tongue only the dead could speak. She stopped behind a thick tree trunk, peering out. In a clearing surrounded by bent trees and strange white stones, Okanwa began to prepare something. He placed Adama's body on a woven mat in the center and drew a large circle of red powder around it, camwood or blood, she couldn't tell. Candles, black and unlit, were arranged at each point of the circle. A small gourd in his hand rattled with what sounded like bones. As he knelt before the corpse, the air shifted. The shadows stretched, and a cold breeze rippled through the leaves, even though the night was still. Nwanuka crouched low, clutching a low branch to steady herself. Okanwa raised his hands and began to chant louder, the rhythm pulsing like a heartbeat. His voice trembled with intensity, and the gourd shook violently in his grip. He poured its contents over the corpse, a black liquid that steamed when it touched the fabric. Suddenly, the flames of the candles burst to life. But instead of orange, they burned a fierce, icy blue. Thunder cracked overhead, loud and close, yet the sky was clear, and no clouds rolled above. Nwanuka gasped. The forest reacted. Leaves began to shiver violently. Vines writhed on their own, slithering across the ground like living things. A loud screech rang out from somewhere unseen, animal or spirit she could not tell. Her body screamed to run, but she couldn't tear her eyes away. Okanwa stumbled back, startled by the sudden burst of blue fire. He muttered faster, more frantically, now visibly shaken. He drew a dagger and slashed his palm, letting his blood drip onto the circle. The corpse lay still for a moment, then its fingers twitched. Nwanuka's breath caught. The corpse's arm moved. Then the other. Adama sat upright. But her eyes were not white anymore, they glowed, dimly, like embers trapped behind glass. She turned slowly, her head moving with a stiffness that seemed detached from flesh, as though her body were a puppet moved by unseen strings. "No," Okanwa whispered, his voice trembling. "You will sleep. I command it." He held up a bone talisman and shouted something guttural. Adama's head snapped toward him. And then, she stood. Every movement was slow but deliberate. Not like a corpse animated by spell, but like a soul returned to claim what was stolen. "Adama," Okanwa choked. "I did what I had to." The fire flared. Blue turned violet. A shock wave of energy burst from the circle, knocking Okanwa backward. He hit the base of a tree with a sickening thud and slumped over, still breathing, but unconscious. At that moment, the forest roared to life. Vines snaked out, curling toward Nwanuka. She scrambled back, slipping on wet leaves. All around her, the trees creaked and groaned, bending unnaturally. From the canopy above, unseen birds took flight in a frenzied swarm, shrieking in panic. She turned and ran. Branches clawed at her skin. Roots tried to trip her. But something behind her, a low chant, deep and guttural, echoed louder and louder. She could feel it vibrating in her bones, like a drum played beneath the earth. The trees seemed endless. The night seemed endless. Her legs burned, lungs screamed, but she didn't stop. Something was coming, something beyond understanding. Then, as she stumbled over a large root and fell hard onto her knees, she felt warmth on her shoulder. But it was not cold like a vine. It was gentle. A hand. A woman's hand. She looked up, heart frozen. There, standing over her, was her mother. Not dead. Not alive. She wore the same wrapper, now glowing faintly, her hair unbound and floating slightly as if caught in invisible water. Her eyes were no longer burning, but soft, full of sorrow and fierce protection. "Run," Adama said again, her voice echoing not just in the air but inside Nwanaka's mind. "I can hold them back, but only for now." "Hold who?" Nwanaka cried. "What's happening? Why did you come back?" Adama's spirit knelt and touched her forehead. "Because he was going to use me to harm you. The ritual wasn't just to silence me. It was to trap my soul and make it serve his bidding. But my love for you would not allow it." Tears spilled down Nwanaka's cheeks. "You must live," Adama whispered. "You must finish what I could not. The truth must come to light." Behind them, the ground split with a sudden crack. Vines erupted like snakes from the earth, lashing at empty air. The forest groaned as if in pain. Adama rose again and turned to face it. "I'll buy you time." "No. I don't want to leave you again. You must. Or all this will have been for nothing." The trees seemed to scream as Adama raised her hands. And Nwanaka ran. She didn't stop until she saw the familiar line of the village wall. She collapsed just before the gates, exhausted, dirty, and sobbing. The guards found her curled beneath the guard post, muttering her mother's name. But it wasn't until morning that someone found Okonwu. He was lying just outside the eastern gate, face down, trembling. Unconscious. His mouth was packed full of grave dirt. Thick and wet, like it had been chewed into his gums. And his eyes were wide open, as if he had seen something no man should ever see. The dreams came first, soft at first, like echoes drifting through water. Nwanaka would wake in the middle of the night with tears on her cheeks and the sensation of someone standing over her, watching. But there would be no one. Just the flickering shadow of the fire's embers and the silence of a hut too big for a 13-year-old girl alone. But the silence didn't stay. She began seeing things in her sleep, visions too clear to be dreams. Her mother, Adama, walked through walls like fog, wearing the same wrapper she was buried in. Her expression was never angry. Just sad. Heavy with sorrow. Each time, her mother would point toward the family shrine at the back of the hut. Then she'd vanish before Nwanaka could speak. At first, Nwanaka thought it was her mind fraying under the weight of grief and terror. But then the visitations bled into the waking world. She began hearing whispers when she was alone, the scent of camwood suddenly filling the air with no explanation. And worse, much worse, was the sight of her mother's form, appearing at the edge of the room near the fire at night. Still. Watching. Not entirely human. Her skin looked slightly paler than she remembered. Her eyes were dim, not white like before, but milky, like smoke behind glass. And sometimes, only sometimes, her mouth would move. The words were soft, distant, but real. Nwanaka would freeze, eyes wide, as her mother's ghost whispered. "The truth is hidden in the drum. Strike it, and it will sing." She repeated it for days, uncertain what it meant. The ancestral drum had sat in their family shrine since before Nwanaka was born. It was sacred, never played, only used in death rites or spirit summoning by her ancestors. Okonwu had forbidden anyone from touching it since Adama's burial. But one morning, with the house empty and her stepfather away at the stream, Nwanaka crept into the shrine. Her heart pounded. The drum stood there, silent, imposing, as if it had been waiting. She touched the leather top, cold and dry. "The truth is hidden." She picked up the pestle beside the altar and raised it with trembling hands. "Strike it." She brought it down. The drum didn't sing, it cracked. A long tear opened across the top. She dropped the pestle, stepping back, horrified. But something inside the drum shifted. She leaned in. There, tucked into the hollow belly, wrapped in dry leaves and a piece of cloth, were objects she was never meant to see. A charm, thin bone, carved with strange runes. And a strip of white fabric soaked in dried blood. She unwrapped it with shaking hands. The smell that hit her was sharp and iron-rich, even after weeks. There were other things too, ashes, dried feathers, and pieces of fingernail. Black magic. Ritualistic. Dark. Nwanika stumbled back, bile rising in her throat. Her hands trembled. Her mother had been right, Okongwu had done something. This was proof. But what could she do with it? She rushed to Mama Jike, the herbalist, clutching the objects in a calabash. The old woman gasped when she saw them, drawing symbols in the air to ward off spirits. "This is not for children," she said, breathless. "This is Onun Dimuo, mouth of the spirits." He used it to silence her soul. "These charms are forbidden." "But she's not silent," Nwanika whispered. "She still speaks." That day, word spread like wildfire. Whispers rippled through the village, twisting truth into myth. Children were pulled indoors. Elders clutched their charms. The village priest came to see the evidence himself, and declared the entire household cursed. He didn't even look at Nwanika. Okongwu did. And the fury in his eyes sent shivers down her spine. At the village square, he accused her of being a witch, claiming she had conjured spirits to disgrace him. He painted her as a girl poisoned by grief, corrupted by the ghost of her mother. "She sleeps with spirits," he told the crowd. "She whispers to the dead. Her mind is broken." Some believed him. Some didn't. But in a village ruled by fear and tradition, belief didn't matter. The priest nodded gravely. "She must be cleansed. The correction temple in Duju will purge her of the spirits. If she survives, she may return." Nwanika's blood ran cold. She'd heard stories of the correction temple. Children taken there came back hollow, or didn't come back at all. The night before her departure, she sat in the dark, knees pulled to her chest, the bone charm in her palm. She didn't cry. She didn't sleep. Her eyes burned with exhaustion, her body heavy from days without proper rest. She could hear Okongwu in the next room, humming a tune. Smug. Victorious. Her rage burned low and deep, like coals under ash. She closed her fist around the charm and whispered, "Mama, are you really still here?" There was no response. Just silence. Then, a wind. But the windows were shut. The flames of the oil lamp flickered, though there was no breeze. And then, in the deepest part of her mind, no, her soul, she heard it. A voice. Clear. Familiar. Firm. "I never left you." Nwanika's breath hitched. The voice echoed inside her skull, inside her ribs, like it came from within her bones. She looked up. And in the reflection of the bronze bowl across the room, she saw her mother. Not in full, but a face, half shadow, half light. Watching her. Protecting her. She wasn't alone. Her mother hadn't left. And now, the real fight was only beginning. The night air was thick with fog as Nwanika crept up the narrow hill path, her sandals pressing into the wet earth, her breath shallow. She had waited until the village fell asleep, then slipped away beneath the cover of shadows, guided by the voice inside her head, her mother's voice, soft and urgent. "Go to the old shrine, the one they sealed before you were born. What you seek is buried in its mouth." She had only heard of the hilltop temple in whispers. The place had been forbidden for generations. They said the gods had left it long ago, that something darker had taken residence. No one went there. Not even the priest. But now, her feet moved with certainty. As though her bones remembered what her mind had forgotten. She reached the crumbled gate as the moon broke through the clouds, revealing the skeletal remains of the ancient shrine. Vines choked the stone pillars, and moss covered the carvings, but the place still pulsed with an unseen energy. Her mother's voice returned, stronger this time. "Go inside." Down. She stepped over the threshold, the thick wooden doors long since rotted away. Inside, it was silent except for her footsteps echoing through the hollow chambers. Ancient statues of forgotten deities lined the walls, their faces eroded into vague expressions, some serene, others twisted. At the back, behind what looked like a broken altar, was a small stone stairway leading into the earth. She hesitated only a moment before descending. The underground chamber smelled of dust, old prayers, and something faintly sweet, like decaying flowers. The walls were carved with images, faded and worn, but still readable in the torchlight from a discarded oil lamp she lit. One mural made her stop breathing. It showed a man, head bowed, kneeling before a massive shadow with 100 eyes. He was offering something cupped in his hands. Above them, a woman's spirit floated, twisted, screaming, bound in black chains. Her heart dropped. The kneeling figure was Okanwu. Even in the stylized form, she recognized the scar above his left brow, the broad shoulders, the crooked stance. And behind the shadow spirit, a name was etched in red. Ezuru. The Whispering One. A deity too old to be called a god, too cruel to be called a demon. The villagers avoided speaking its name, but Nwanuka remembered now, once, long ago, her mother had said, "Some blessings are not from heaven. Be wary of gifts that come too easily." The mural continued. In the next frame, the same man stood over a woman's grave, burying a heart wrapped in black feathers. Blood poured from the earth. But in the final image, something changed. A girl, young, small, but radiant, stood facing the shadow. Her chest blazed with light. At her side was the faint form of the bound woman, now free and fierce. The shadow recoiled, cracking, breaking into shards of darkness. At the bottom of the mural, a line was carved in an ancient dialect that her mother's voice translated for her. "Only a heart still warm with love can shatter Azuru's chains." Nwanuka touched the carving, her fingers trembling. The prophecy, it was about her. Her and her mother. She was meant to end this. But to do so, she needed something buried with her mother. "I must return to the grave," she whispered, heart racing. She slipped from the shrine before sunrise and crept through the waking village, unseen. The burial ground lay at the edge of the forest, just beyond the village's sacred tree. The graves were simple, unmarked except for small stones and clay tokens. She found her mother's resting place by memory. The ground had settled but not hardened completely. She felt her knees and began to dig with her bare hands. Each handful of dirt felt heavier than the last. Her fingers bled. Her arms ached. But she didn't stop. She could feel the pull now, like a thread connecting her to the earth. Then, her fingers brushed cloth. The burial wrapper. She froze. The voice came again, this time not inside her head but just beside her ear, like breath. "You're almost there, my child. Be brave." She dug faster, revealing the full upper body. Her mother's face was still and pale, her eyes closed, but peaceful. Not terrifying. Not twisted. Tears welled in Nwanuka's eyes. "I'm sorry I have to do this." She reached for the object around the corpse's neck, a pendant made of carved ivory shaped like a flame. Her mother's most cherished possession. The one she never took off in life. Mama Ajike had said it was a family heirloom, passed down through generations of seers and protectors. Nwanuka grasped it. And the corpse's eyes snapped open. She gasped, falling backward into the dirt. But her mother didn't move. Didn't breathe. She only looked at Nwanuka, and smiled. A soft, warm smile. Nwanuka stared, frozen, chest heaving. Then a voice, clearer than ever before, filled the air, not just in her head, but around her. "You found it. The fire within. We are not finished yet, my daughter." The earth trembled beneath her. The pendant glowed faintly in her palm. Nwanuka stood, wiping her face, her body shaking not with fear, but purpose. The next step would be the hardest. The ritual must begin. And the shadow was watching. The village square buzzed with uneasy energy. Colorful fabrics were draped between trees, drums lined the edges of the open space, and women pounded yam and stirred soups, but no one sang. No one danced. Even the drummers hit their rhythms without joy. There was something wrong about the ceremony they'd been ordered to prepare. Something off about the way the birds no longer chirped near the trees. Something chilling in how the earth had gone still. Nwanuka stood by the tree line, wrapped in a simple brown wrapper, the ivory flame pendant tucked beneath her collar. Beside her, Mama Ajike whispered words under her breath, grinding a mix of herbs and powdered bones into a clay bowl. A thick paste bubbled within it, reeking of bitter leaves and ancient dust. "Stay hidden until I signal," Mama Ajike murmured. "We must not act before the binding is complete, or the trap will fail." Nwanuka nodded, though her hands trembled. Today was the day. Today, she would face the monster that had lived among them, wearing the face of a husband, of a stepfather, of a man revered by fools. And today, she would meet a being far older and darker than she had words for. She scanned the gathering crowd. Okongwu stood at the center, dressed in pristine white robes trimmed with red, a color reserved for royalty or powerful ritual. His face was calm, too calm. His eyes darted to the shadows, to the old shrine, to where no one stood. He knew something stirred. Then she arrived. The new bride. The woman from Nwanuka's visions. She walked barefoot over the dusty ground, her steps leaving no prints. Her skin was pale as moonlight, her eyes shimmering like oil on water. Her lips curled into a smile too perfect, too symmetrical. The villagers muttered prayers under their breath. Some said she came from another village. Others claimed she came from the mountain. But Nwanuka knew the truth. This was not a woman. This was a Zuru. Disguised in flesh and bone, adorned with beads, and cloaked in charm. The same spirit Okongwu had once begged for wealth, offering Adama's soul in return. The same spirit that now came to seal the final pact, with Nwanuka as the final sacrifice. Okongwu stepped forward with a carved necklace, made of bones etched with strange runes. He lifted it toward the bride's neck. That was the moment. Mama Ajike gave the signal. Nwanuka stepped into the square, pendant in hand, and shouted, "Stop!" Every head turned. Gasps rippled through the crowd. Okongwu's face twisted with rage. "You dare speak during the sacred rite?" But the bride only turned her head slowly to Nwanuka. And smiled wider. "It is time, child," she said, not with her mouth, but with her thoughts. The voice echoed inside Nwanuka's skull, layered with thousands of whispers. "Come. Let us end the bloodline." Nwanuka didn't flinch. She held up the pendant and let it dangle in the air. "You took my mother. But you won't take me." Mama Ajike began chanting loudly now, drawing sigils into the dust with a staff made of sacred wood. A strong wind kicked up, spiraling around the square. The trees swayed. The sky turned a dull, sickly green. Okongwu lunged, but his feet rooted into the ground. The binding had begun. Nwanuka stepped forward, the pendant glowing hotter in her hand. "You made a pact, Okongwu," she said, voice shaking. "And you broke it. My mother's soul never passed. It stayed. It witnessed." Suddenly, the air cracked. A deep rumble echoed from below the earth. The bride, Izuru, lifted her head. Her eyes turned pitch black. Her body flickered like smoke, revealing what lay beneath, a twisting column of shadows, eyes, mouths, arms reaching for something unseen. "You dare defy the Ancient Ones?" Izuru hissed. "You are a spark in the dark. I am the endless night." Nwanuka took a final step forward and reached into her pouch. The bone charm. Her mother's voice filled the square, not just in her mind this time, but everywhere. It came from the trees, the stones, the very wind. "My daughter. Now." Nwanuka raised the bone charm and whispered, "Let love break the chain." She snapped it in half. The world exploded in light. A blinding white column erupted from the earth, shooting into the sky. Izuru screamed, not in pain, but in rage. Okongwu writhed, his body breaking apart into grains of ash. The villagers fell to their knees, covering their eyes. From the center of the light, a figure rose. Adama. Not as a corpse. Not as a ghost. But radiant and whole. She floated above the ground, eyes glowing gold, her hair swirling like fire. She reached for Nwanuka, and her hand passed through the girl's chest, not hurting, but merging. Their spirits fused. The flames from the pendant ignited around Nwanuka's heart. Izuru shrieked, shrinking, unraveling like cloth soaked in acid. "You cannot kill a god," it cried. "No," Nwanuka replied, her voice now doubled with her mother's, "but you can banish one." The light pulsed one last time. Then, silence. The wind stopped. The square emptied of noise. Izuru was gone. Only a black scorch remained on the earth. Okanwa's ashes blew away on the wind. And Nwanuka collapsed into her mother's arms, arms that held her now, real and solid, for just a moment longer. The villagers approached slowly, fearful and awed. But Mama Ajike only smiled. "Let them whisper," she said. "Today, the child of the dead has burned the darkness." But Nwanuka knew it was not over yet. Not while Izuru's eyes still watched from the cracks between worlds. There was one final step left. The earth trembled beneath the feet of the gathered villagers as the last echoes of the blinding light faded into a heavy silence. Where Okanwa and the false bride had once stood, the ground cracked open wide like a gaping maw, swallowing them whole. The earth's hungry jaws closed swiftly, sealing their fate in an eternal grave. No ashes remained, no traces of their dark presence except the faint, lingering scent of burnt herbs and the acrid bite of scorched soil. Izuru's final scream, a chilling wail of rage and defeat, ripped through the air, shattering the calm. It was a sound no one would forget, the cry of an ancient darkness forced back into the shadows. And then, as if the world had held its breath for centuries, the wind stopped. The birds resumed their songs, the leaves whispered softly again, and the village of Izenzu exhaled. Nwanuka's legs gave out beneath her. The last remnants of strength fled her body, and she collapsed to the dusty ground, eyes heavy with exhaustion and relief. Her breath came in ragged gasps as she lay beneath the brightening sky, the dawn's first light casting gentle warmth over her face. And then, in that quiet moment between life and dreams, her mother appeared. Adama's spirit stood before her, no longer the rigid corpse or the restless shade, but radiant and peaceful. Her eyes held a deep, enduring love as she smiled softly. She knelt down and kissed Nwanuka's forehead, a touch that carried the weight of generations and the promise of new beginnings. "I can rest now," she whispered, her voice like a breeze rustling through dry grass. Nwanuka reached out, but the spirit's form began to dissolve with the morning light, blending into the golden rays and vanishing like mist. A tear slipped down Nwanuka's cheek, mixing sorrow with hope. The village soon felt the change ripple through its soil and soul. The once fallow fields burst into vibrant green, cassava, maize, and yams pushed up through the earth as if waking from a long slumber. The streams ran clearer, the air tasted sweeter, and the heavy shadows that had hung over Izenzu began to lift. The elders gathered beneath the ancient baobab tree, their faces lined with age and wisdom. After long deliberation, they bestowed upon Nwanuka a new name, a name that carried the weight of her journey and the legacy she had forged. She was the one who walked with the dead. The name was spoken with reverence and awe, whispered from lips to eager ears, weaving into the very fabric of village lore. Despite the peace, however, something within Nwanuka remained unsettled. Nights were the hardest. Though the sun chased away the shadows and the village felt safe once more, she could never fully escape the memory of what had transpired. Each night, as she lay beneath her thin blanket, one ear remained alert to the smallest sound. Sometimes, when the village slept and the wind sang a lonely song through the trees, Nwanuka swore she heard her mother's voice. A soft whisper, carried on the air just beyond hearing. "I'm watching over you." The words were a comfort and a warning, a reminder that the bond between them was unbroken, alive in the quiet spaces between worlds. But some nights, when the fire guttered low, and the darkness grew thick and hungry, Nwanuka's eyes would snap open. And the mat beside her would shift ever so slightly. As if something stirred beneath it. Something that should not be there. Something that never truly sleeps.